I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these.
Hello, hello. My question is for this one, why do people defend leaders who absolutely humiliate them? And before you come for a particular political party or another, they both do it. They both absolutely do it. And we're going to get into that. But first, let me welcome some folks. Auntie is here first. Hi with the peace sign. Inspirational Truth is here. Hi there. Snowman is here. I'm in his ears while he preps for women's basketball. Adrian says, let's go. Cosmic Surfer TV, hello to you as well. This is the best live tribe on YouTube, bar none. So for those of you watching from the clouds, please feel free to say hello. You will be welcomed as long as you're appropriate. And also shout out to the replay gang. Hey, Catting Up with the Joneses, thanks for being here. He is also part of the live tribe. So let's get into this because it's a lot. It's a lot. So first we're going to talk about what is malignant narcissism, because this is a term that gets thrown around. Okay. So narcissism, sometimes people use it like the person is annoying or they're self-absorbed or they post too many selfies and they get called narcissistic. That's not what this means. In clinical psychology, there is something called malignant narcissism, but it is not an official diagnosis. It is a reference, okay, to particular behavior. It is a construct that we use in psychoanalysis, and it's also used in something called personality theory when we talk about personality traits and personality disorders. This is a term that we use. And if you want to follow up with this, if this is something you're really interested in, look up Otto Kernberg, Kernb, and I'm pretty sure it's ERG. Okay, so this is not narcissistic personality disorder. That is a diagnosis. So we want to be sure that we don't confuse the two, because again, like I said in the beginning, I'm not trying to diagnose anybody. We're just talking information, okay? Malignant narcissism, think about cancer, right? Malignant means, the bad kind, right? Benign means it's not cancerous. But malignant narcissism is basically like narcissism on steroids. Malignant narcissism is mixed with traits that make it far more dangerous, especially if the person has any type of authority or they're in a position of power. It's like a configuration of personality traits that when you put them together, it's like a perfect storm for abuse, cruelty, authoritarianism, those kind of things. Clinically, malignant narcissism includes 4 major components, and I've got those up on the screen. So for those of you listening and not watching, you can always come back and look at it, but I'm going through it. Okay, so component number 1 is narcissistic personality traits. So let's talk about some classic traits just so that we know exactly what those are. So grandiosity, which means like this inflated sense of self-importance, a constant need for admiration and attention, extreme sensitivity to criticism, and a deep dependence on external validation to regulate their self-esteem. They cannot regulate their self-esteem without that external praise, okay? Underneath all of that, though, is something that people often miss, right? This is a very, very fragile ego. It's a very fragile sense of self. I usually explain it like if you've seen Men in Black, where there's the 2 guys that are at the restaurant, the big tall guy with the strong jaw is there. And then at some point, one of them's face opens up and there's this little tiny squishy guy that's actually operating the big strong guy. That is what narcissism is like. the ego and the sense of self is this little tiny, very fragile, squishy guy on the inside. And so everything that happens outwardly is a reaction to how small they feel inwardly. So they don't feel secure. This is why they need all of this external attention, admiration, praise, feedback, blah, 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 because they actually feel inferior. They would never admit it, but they feel inferior. So they have to have constant reinforcement that they are special, that they are superior, that they are chosen, that they are exceptional. So that's the first one. The second one is antisocial features, which antisocial can also be a personality disorder. But in this case, we're talking about some features. This is where you see like a complete disregard for rules. Now, there's a lot of people who, when they're told to do something, their initial inclination is no, because somebody told them to do something. That is not antisocial. Okay. Usually those are people who have been abused by people who are antisocial, but it's a complete disregard for the rules. The rules do not apply for me. It's a disregard for social norms, right? The things that these social agreements, right, that we have as a society to remain civil, which I don't like that word too much because it gets used by white supremacists, but right? So a complete disregard for that, disregard for the rights of other people. There is pathological lying, lots of willingness to manipulate. There's lots of exploitation, lots of deception, and zero remorse for those things. Always had a good reason, always had a really good reason to do that. Empathy is very limited, or it's applied selectively. Certain people get empathy, but other people do not. People in general are seen as tools, so things to be used, or things to be exploited, like a means to an end, like ants. People with antisocial traits tend to believe that they are like the only person in the situation, if that makes sense. These are the type of people that if they have a strong feeling about something, they're going to do something to you to make you feel that feeling. I tend to, like, an example is if it's your birthday, and so you're getting all of this attention, and that makes the person feel envious, then they're going to do things to either ruin your birthday so you both feel bad, or say and do a bunch of things to try to make you feel envious, which will ruin your birthday anyway. All of their relationships are transactional. What you can do for me, and I will only pay you back what I commodify your behavior as. So this is why these personalities often thrive in environments where accountability is weak and power is concentrated. Because if you have all the power, you can be as antisocial as you want to be. So number 3 is paranoia. So paranoia is a chronic sense that others are out to get them, which chronic means over a long period of time. Acute means right away, it just happened. Chronic is over a long period of time. So it's this chronic sense that people are out to get them. People are their enemy. So enemies are everywhere. Criticism is not feedback, it's attack. So think J.D. Vance, right? He says, we don't have to apologize for being white anymore. He made up, they all made up that whole attack on whiteness, kind of like making up the attack on Christmas or attack on Christianity, right? It's not real. So they feel like, so people who with these components feel like that any movement towards equality is an attack, that any movement towards equality is somehow oppression against them. So we see this a lot in white supremacy. Hi, Sick Diggy. Thanks for being here. Especially if there's no self-awareness within the narcissist in question, which they kind of goes hand in hand. It is so rare for a narcissist to be self-aware that I only know of one, and he has a huge following on social media because he's able to give the game to other people and to say where he is just not a safe person to be around. So, but then people want to be around him because he seems so self-aware and he's like, yo, stop it. Like women keep getting crushes on him and he's like, I'm not a safe person. What are you talking about? Hi, Vincent. Thanks for being here. Adrian says, sound like zero-sum game. Yep. Yep. Definitely. So this paranoia leads to hypervigilance. So vigilance is a way that we know what vigilance is keeping your head on a swivel, like watching out for things. Hypervigilant is like always hyper aware of literally everything. Head on a swivel becomes an owl, you know. This also leads to scapegoating, like everything has to be somebody else's fault, right? There always has to be a scapegoat because if I'm narcissistic and antisocial, it's never my fault. It can never be my fault. It always has to be somebody else's fault. So there's constant scapegoats. Inspirational says, if they tick off everyone, is the paranoia an adaptation? I mean, you can look at it like that. The way I tend to look at it as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Almost like, I'm going to break up with you before you break up with me. Like, I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me. And I'm going to do all these things. And that proves my already thought that you are my enemy when you fight back. So it's kind of like this, it's this circular reasoning. It's the self-sabotage, self-fulfilling prophecy. Sick Diggy says that HG Tudor calls himself an ultra narcissist. Yeah. Is that the guy? He says I follow him as well. Is that okay? So the guy that I follow is a black guy who is very insightful about his narcissism, but I don't remember his name, so it could be the same guy. Inspirational says like a catch-22. Yeah, for sure, for sure. So they have to have this constant narrative that they're being attacked, that they're under siege, they're under fire. You know, think about the witch hunt, the Democratic hoax, they're always making stuff up about Trump, right? And we can hear that and it's very overt and we're like, oh yeah, it's totally that. But the Dems also do it when they do things like, well, vote for me because I'm not Trump. Vote for me because I'm not a Republican. And if the Republicans do blah, 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 all these bad things are going to happen to you. If you vote Republicans in, the world's going to end, right? That's that constant narrative of being under siege. It's the same thing. It's fear mongering and it's pandering to that paranoia. Okay. So in leadership, this gets externalized. So in leadership, they will say things like, they're plotting against us. They're trying to destroy me. They stole the election. At least I'm not Trump. At least I'm not a Republican. They're coming for you. They're coming after your rights. They're coming after your guns. They're coming after blah, blah, blah. They're attacking Christmas. They're attacking white men. There's always this plot, this nefarious plot against those people. Oh, H.G. Tudor, because I thought Tudor was a British name. The Tudors, right, is British. He has a series of books as well as a YouTube channel where he gives the normies the game. Yeah, nice. I don't know that guy's name, but he gives such great information. Okay, guys, when I find him again, I won't say if, when I find him again, I'll try to put it in the comments of this show so that you guys can look at that. Sick Diggy says he was diagnosed as a narcissistic psychopath. Yeah, because narcissists are psychopaths, borderline type behaviors are sociopaths. and so can antisocial, but they all kind of blend sometimes. So, paranoia becomes the tool for mobilizing fear and loyalty. So, both sides are doing this constant fear mongering when we're talking about politics. So, the last component is sadism. And I also put up here where you can see it Schadenfreude. So, for those of you who don't remember, Schadenfreude is getting enjoyment from other people's pain, from watching other people suffer. That's what Schadenfreude is. And isn't it interesting that it's a German word, but it's sadism. Okay. Sadism isn't always sexual, right? That's sexual sadism. So, this one is the most disturbing component of malignant narcissism. Um, so, getting pleasure from someone's pain is one thing. Like on a real surface level, this is like, remember back in the day they had America's Funniest Videos, or like when we watched Vines, or now when we're watching Reels and somebody's playing T-ball with their kid and they hit the ball and the ball hits dad in the groin and he falls over and it's like ha ha ha, or somebody's skateboarding and they like eat it, and ha ha ha. That's a very surface level Schadenfreude. That is not pathological. This is much, much deeper. This is where there is actual psychological and emotional gratification from humiliating other people. They get enjoyment from dominating, from causing distress, from watching people squirm. They love it. Yeah. So, it's not just being mean, so when people are like, "Oh, you're a malignant narcissist because you're kind of a mean person or you're an a-hole." This is different. It's deeper. This is deriving a sense of power, pleasure, and even being able to utilize emotional regulation through the suffering of others. Like, "Oh, I'm having a bad day. I'm really sad. Let me up with some other people and I'll feel so much better." Right? So some examples are like public shaming people, mocking people, especially mocking people who you feel are vulnerable or weak, using cruel nicknames, name calling, encouraging crowds to like turn on people and go after people, hang Mike Pence. It serves a psychological purpose. It restores the narcissist's sense of superiority and control. It's emotional parasitism, Sikdigi says. Yeah, it can be. You see the emotional parasitism more with these codependent relationships. I mean, yes, they are creating emotions with which they can feed off of. But there's two different types of vampirism. So maybe we can talk about that at some point. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. Mental healness channel, Inspiration Truth says, "Thank you so much, Inspirational Truth. I appreciate that. Thank you." So I think we can all figure out why this is like dangerous. If you put all these characteristics into one person, we can figure it out. But when you have narcissism, antisocial traits, paranoia, sadism, this is not just a difficult person. This is a person who literally lives outside of reality completely, right? This is somebody who needs admiration to even survive psychologically. They have to have it. They have no problem lying, no problem exploiting other people and then tell you they didn't do it, right? They see enemies everywhere and they feel so much better and so much calmer when other people are degraded. Wow. That is a personality structure that is uniquely suited for being an authoritarian, unfortunately, because the more power they have, the more emotionally stable they feel. However, that is a bottomless pit. Okay. So the more power they have, the more emotionally stable they feel. And then they need more power to feel more emotionally stable, and so on and so on and so on and so on. There is no end to that game. The more opposition that they face, the more aggressive and paranoid they become. Again, because they see an attack everywhere. Yes, those that they deem beneath them. Yes, sick diggy. People who are malignant narcissists only like and only respect other malignant narcissists. Unfortunately, they will literally turn on anyone, even their friends who are malignant narcissists, because again, everything is very surface. But the only people they see as smart or respectable are successful malignant narcissists. So that's who they surround themselves with. So, why do these folks seem to be so drawn to politics? I mean, why is it we keep getting these authoritarian people, right? Let me get this. Okay. So, if malignant narcissism is a personality structure that needs power, attention, and control to regulate itself, then politics isn't just like kind of attractive, like, oh, that looks nice to these personalities. It's perfectly designed for them, as well as things like the police, border patrol, and the military. All of those things seem so great, so sweet for someone who is a malignant narcissist. Again, not a diagnosis, okay? And again, not all border patrol, not all ICE, maybe not all police. I'm going to say that not all military members are malignant narcissists, but there is something that draws them to that has power in it. But this is where you will find those folks in those kind of arenas: politics, border control, ICE, policing, the military. Okay. And pastors. Thank you, Adrian. But we will get into that because this is a 3-part series. So right now we're focusing on politics, but you are correct, because that's another place where you can have unfettered power, is in the church, right? And also in finance, you can have unfettered power. Okay. So politics offers something that most environments don't, and that is access to power, public visibility, right? Because you need all of that external validation, very weak accountability, because people who are in politics, they get away with stuff, lots of stuff, or the police. And large numbers of people who can be emotionally mobilized, your followers, your voters, your voter base. You can emotionally mobilize them. So that's an amazing source for these people. So when he's talking about parasitism, in these types of folks, they need sources that they can mobilize, that they can feed off, that they can get from, and they will throw people away as soon as they stop being a good source. That's why I said they'll throw anybody away. It doesn't matter who you are. Power, control, attention, narcissistic supply. That's narcissistic supply. Thank you, Sick Diggy. Those sources. For most people, power is like a tool, and it's a responsibility, right? You have power, you have a responsibility to wield it appropriately. It is a tool for which to accomplish things. For a malignant narcissist, power is emotional regulation, okay? When they feel admired, feared, obeyed, then they're stable. They're stable folks. When they feel challenged, criticized, or limited, then that is a personal threat. And that's when you see rage, paranoia, and escalation. Like a president who tells a reporter, "Shut up, piggy," or tells another reporter, "Because you're too stupid to know." Okay. This is why these personalities often seem calm when they are dominating, when they are in a position of domination and they are surrounded by sycophants, right? They become explosive when they don't have their sycophants all around them and they're confronted about something, especially a lie. Because remember, pathological lying is part of this, the gaslighting and reality changing, all of that kind of stuff. The power soothes them and limits enrage them. You cannot limit them. Don't we know who they are? They want spectacle over substance. So think about all the, examples that I gave. Spectacle over substance. And I'm including the Democratic Party in there, friends. Think about how pandering and performative the Democratic Party is. It's just that it seems that the Republican Party is more overt with it, and the Democratic Party is more covert with it, but they're all a bunch of feckless hand-wringers now who are playing ball, so I got no respect for them either. Oh, Sick Diggy, you are not coming off as annoying. You are helping and, getting those words out there that I need to say. You're helpful. Thank you so much. That is not annoying in the slightest. So, spectacle over substance. Modern politics rewards the spectacle, right? Get your booty to the polls. That's a spectacle, right? No vote, no, what was it? No vote, no V, something. Those are spectacles. There is no substance to that. It plays directly into malignant narcissistic traits. Oh, Adrian brought up another one, spectacle over substance, when the Dems did the now famous daishiki poses. So they go to Africa and they put on these daishikis because they don't know S about them. Okay. Because I can speak to it a little better, I kind of equate the patterns to like tartans in Scotland. So specific clans or, tribes, how we know of them, family members, have specific patterns of a tartan. This is a specific pattern that means a specific thing. And if you are not part of that, you should not be wearing that or putting that forth. And here these Dems come and they don't know anything about daishikis, patterns, how to wear them, why you should wear them, what you should wear. And they just, ridiculously do those things. It was very much spectacle over substance. Oh, yeah. Adrian says no vote, no vucking. That's what it was. Spectacle. There is no substance to that whatsoever. None. Sick Diggy says the Dems sporting kente scarves and and that's that kneeling in solidarity with the BLM and George Floyd protests in 2020. Isn't that related to them wearing the daishikis? Or that's too, didn't they go to Africa when they wore the daishikis? Somebody help me. Adrian and Sick Diggy, please help me with those two different situations. But yes, very performative, very spectacle. Look at me, how I, go down here with the plebeians and the black people who are, asking to quit being killed on the street. And I wear a scarf because I'm with the people. No substance whatsoever. Right, Sick Diggy. Each tartan represents a particular clan, or what we would call a tribe. But these are family. They are attached to family names. For instance, Thompson comes from MacTavish. That comes from that clan. And the Thompsons have a very specific tartan. My dad, very Scottish person. And so, we know what our pattern is. And so that's why I felt like I'm a little more comfortable talking about that. But it's the same for those patterns that they were wearing. Oh, they were in the halls of Congress when they did that photo op. Okay, thank you, Sick Diggy. Okay, so, yeah. Matt Gregor, Campbell, yep. So, Modern politics rewards spectacle more than the substance, right? It's all spectacle and fear mongering, interspersed with a bunch of pathological lying. Anything they promise you, they're not going to do. Okay. This plays directly into malignant narcissist traits. They're like, yeah, that's the place for me. Spectacle, a following, people I can control and tell what to do. And I can lie all I want and change reality and nobody holds me accountable. Perfect. Right. And they are often strikingly highly skilled at provoking emotional reactions, creating dramatic narratives, turning complex problems into their own personal battle. It's a witch hunt. They're coming after me. It's a Democratic hoax. Adrian says, yes, they went to Africa during Floyd and they did the dashiki stuff in the US in roughly the same time period. Okay. Pelosi and then Omar held hands at the door of no return. Yeah, Ilhan Omar. Okay. Thank you, Sick Diggy and Adrian. Like, please, because I don't want to be using things as examples that I don't have the exact details for. So thank you so very much. So these folks in politics, they can make everything about themselves. And then that keeps the spotlight exactly where they need it because they don't want the spotlight going anywhere else, right? So, in many political systems, the consequences for unethical behavior are delayed, okay? They're diluted or they're non existent. And in our current political climate, more power is given to one branch of the government that can then just refuse to follow the judgments, orders, laws, or accountability. That is what has happened with our current president. The Supreme Court, you know how we're supposed to have three branches, checks and balances. The Supreme Court said that the executive branch overrules the other two branches of government, and that anything that a president does during the course of his tenure as president is you cannot convict them for that. Okay, this is what the Supreme Court said. So the system teaches the narcissist that their bad behavior is rewarded and reinforced. Adrian says, trust me, I'm sure me and Sick Diggy were trying to forget. I'm sure that was so cringe. I mean, even like when you showed it to me, Adrian, that's so cringe. Okay, so let's talk about the enemy narrative, okay? Malignant narcissists thrive on enemies or the enemy narrative, even if there isn't one. Politics provides a constant supply of enemies. The radical liberals, the radical left, the hoax, the right domestic terrorists, the enemy from within, right? So we hear all of them constantly fear-mongering, both sides, okay? Because they have opposing parties, right? It's this bilateral opposing parties. And then the media plays into it, and then the institutions play into it, and then all the marginalized groups are pointing at each other, and then it's then the elites versus the outsiders, right? This allows paranoia to be externalized and then weaponized. We never hold accountable the people who are screwing up our life. We're only holding the people accountable who they tell us is causing the problem. And I'm sorry, but somebody stealing diapers or using SNAP benefits, or working a 90-hour work week doing lawn maintenance is not the person who's making my life miserable. They're just not. So the followers are then recruited into their emotional narrative. Hi, Spain Man. Thanks for being here. Also part of the best live tribe right there. So there's this charisma without conscience, let's call it. Okay. Another reason that politics attracts these personalities is that charisma, not charm, charisma can substitute for a conscience, right? Because they're always trying to activate somebody. And so they can activate other people's conscience through their charisma. People often mistake competence and dominance for being competent. And these are separate things, right? Confidence and dominance does not equal leadership, and it never equals honesty, ever, ever. Okay, a malignant narcissist can appear to be decisive and bold and fearless even when they are being reckless and uninformed and ignorant and destructive. They still they use AI to post things up on social media where they're raining poop down on protesters, or AI images of them without a shirt and all these muscles and doing all of these things that make them seem so big and strong and capable, even when they are being reckless, ignorant, and destructive. Okay, the performance of strength becomes more important than the substance of their leadership, right? He's going to get things done. He's going to make sure these things happen. He's going to drain the swamp. He's going to do these things. Hi, Kyle Smiley. Thanks for being here. Or is it Kylie? Kylie Smiley? Kylie. Love from Oregon. Thank you so much for being here. Let me know if it's Kyle or Kylie, so I know which to call you. Okay, so the institutions are like these psychological mirrors, okay? Institutions reflect and amplify the personality structures of the people in the office. So it's Kylie. Hi, Kylie. Thanks for being here. So in politics, malignant narcissism is often mirrored back as strong leadership, taking no prisoners, telling it like it is. No, he's no longer PC. We're not being PC, and draining the swamp. But that's his personality. So these people tend to rise, not just appear out of nowhere. They rise, okay, which is very important because these personalities don't just seem to enter politics, Trump included. Okay, they often rise in it because they're willing to do what other people won't do or won't say, because they'll say really terrible things and they'll break norms that other people respect. And the reason I say Trump too is because even though he wasn't a politician, he wasn't an elected official, he has always been very involved with politics and politicians. Always very involved. Okay, so he's always been in politics. He is a politician. He has always been a politician since day one. When people were like, but he's not a politician, he's absolutely a politician. Always has been. To quote Dr. Dre, it's all entertainment. Yeah, that's why they call it political theater. You know what I mean? So, in dysfunctional systems, which we know that our political system is dysfunctional, hopefully we all know that. I don't want to go into a diatribe explaining it, but it is dysfunctional. It does not benefit but a few. So in dysfunctional system, those traits can be misinterpreted as being effective. So the very qualities that make someone psychologically dangerous can make them politically successful, especially if they're saying the secret things that you think, but you can't say out loud. Because then I like you a whole bunch when you say the racist things or the misogynistic things or the ableist things. I like you a whole lot when you say the secret things out loud. And then I can say, he's telling it like it is, right? But here's the part that people find confusing. At least I find it confusing. Okay. It is super baffling to me. Even when the cruelty is obvious, even when the lies are obviously wrong and they are openly abusive, people stay loyal. What? The sycophants are what just boggle the mind. And it's not because these folks are stupid. It is not because they're stupid. But we have to look to group psychology because that's where we can find out what the hell is going on with the sycophants. Okay? Sycophants. Because allegiance replaces thinking. Even though we find it baffling, those sycophants will say things like, no, we will say to the sycophants, I'm sorry, how can smart people believe this? Like, how can educated people defend this behavior? Don't they see what's happening? And here's an uncomfortable truth. Intelligence does not protect you from psychological capture. In some cases, it actually makes people better at rationalizing what they're emotionally committed to. If I'm super intelligent and I am emotionally committed to Kamala Harris, then regardless of what she's done in the past that I was totally against, I don't like when anybody does that, no matter what she's doing right now that I don't really like, and I was totally against that, and she's giving me no platform to see what she's going to do in the future, I can rationalize all of that using my intelligence because I am emotionally committed to being a sycophant to this person. You know, the vote blue no matter who, that is being a sycophant. Okay? The allegiance has never been about facts. It's about your identity. And think back to narcissists and how inferior their identity is. So for the sycophants, allegiance isn't about their policy. It isn't about logic. It isn't about evidence. It's about their identity. Where is my sense of belonging? Who do I align with? And if my identity aligns with your identity, makes sense? It leads to our feelings of belonging, our status, our meaning. Remember Maslow's, right? These are things that we need. We need belonging, status, meaning to our lives. So we can easily become a sycophant when we see that this person in power has something similar to us. She's a woman, and all women have to stick together, and we got to vote for a woman because all women. No, this is a woman who put women in jail. So she's not for women. She's not women first. She's not a gal's gal. So why are the women rationalizing in that way to say, well, we got to get the woman in up? No, she doesn't like women. Yeah, the us versus them, for sure, for sure. Hannah Arendt's concept of the banality of evil comes to mind. That's good. So once loyalty becomes your identity, then changing your mind doesn't feel like, hey, I just learned something new. Hey, I just got some more information. It feels like betrayal. It feels like you've been exiled out of this group that is part of your identity. It's like a psychological death, okay? Because you are experiencing that ego death with very little coping mechanisms, and you have a lowered ability to deal with the cognitive dissonance. So then you have to rationalize. These are people who they did this with Biden and they do this with Trump all the time. What he meant was, no, we're sticking with what he said. What he said was, Biden was a huge racist, huge. And he did do weird things like smell little kids' heads. It's weird as hell. But you had people, well, what he meant was, well, no, that's not really. And people do it with Trump constantly. What he meant was, well, what that goes back to, well, he's playing 4D chess and you don't even know. Like, stop it. Stop it. Just because you feel threatened doesn't mean that you have to bend reality for this person. You don't. Okay. Left ring, right ring, wing, same vulture. Yeah, I say the same thing. I always say same bird, because they use the eagle. You know what I mean? Um, One of the most powerful psychological mechanisms here is identification, right? It is part of your identity to be a sycophant to that person. And in this case, it is identification with an abuser, with an aggressor, with someone who will humiliate you and throw you away. But it's like a survival strategy. Okay. Instead of feeling powerless in the face of the domination, people will unconsciously align themselves with the source of power as a means of protection. Okay. If I attach myself to this powerful group, this powerful person, the person that I see as having strength, then I'm with them and I won't be the one being crushed. Even if my protector also hurts me, it's kind of like the abuse you know is better than the abuse you don't know. I guess allegiance is the path of least resistance for some people. Yes, inspirational truth. Two wings, same bird. Yep. 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 So modern media plays into this so much. It creates what we call parasocial relationships, para meaning around. So parasocial relationships. People feel like that they know these public figures at a personal level. They feel like they have this relationship with these people, one with emotional intimacy. So for sycophants, this becomes loyalty to power itself and the feeling of being close to dominance. That's why they'll say things like, what she meant was, because you feel like, well, she would never betray me. So power becomes a substitute attachment figure. Now, this is daddy, this is mommy. Okay. Essentially replacing an authority they should have had and learned from growing up. Then they'll get one that feels similar. The abuse you know is better than the abuse you don't know. We'll talk about that one in just a minute. Hey, Leon, you're not late. You're here right when you were supposed to be. That's why they have watching at 1.5 speed or replay gang. You're great, but thanks for being here. So once someone has publicly aligned themselves, especially loudly, the psychological cost of being wrong becomes enormous. Okay. Admitting error doesn't just mean I was mistaken. And in this day and age, for some reason, we just can't do it. I used to be, I'll speak for myself, but I've said this to people. I used to be totally feminist, totally liberal, because I bought into what they told me. And it took learning a bunch of stuff to be like, I don't like those labels for myself. Because those labels tend to still view life as a pie. And if one person gets a big piece, another person gets a small piece. And I don't believe that at my core. I don't. I'm a transcendentalist. Everyone deserves as much freedom as they can possibly stand to meet their personal potential. And I don't get to tell you what that is. That's what I believe in. So I can admit it. I can say, I got more information. So now I do something different. I learned from it. It should be easy, right? But in this day and age, you get shamed so much for saying you were wrong. You get made fun of, you get ousted, but you know what? You're getting doxxed for doing heinous crap anyway. So you might as well say you were wrong and say, oh, sorry. I was contributing to something that I don't think was great. And you can say you're sorry. You can say, yeah, Kylie says birthing pains for the new and that this all happened for a reason. I don't disagree. You can say things like, I trusted the wrong authority figure. I believe, like I just said, I believed the way it was sold to me. I may have harmed other people by defending this. But that level of shame and accepting accountability is intolerable for a lot of people. So instead of updating their beliefs, the mind repairs reality. So facts are an attack. Do you see how that happens? If I'm on the defensive, then whatever facts you're giving, you're attacking me and you're wrong. Evidence becomes your bias. That's your bias. That's your opinion, even when you're giving stats and figures, right? Contradictions with the narrative that they're saying, well, those are conspiracies and you're a conspiracy theorist. But not because they're stupid, but because their identity is on the line here and they can't do it, right? This is where we get things like we don't want CRT in public schools. Well, they were never going to teach CRT to the elementary students. That's a college class. But then they labeled everything CRT and everybody got up in arms, and the book banning and all of that. We have to get rid of facts because the facts are the attack on identity. Our identity is being attacked with facts. So we just get rid of the facts, right? Spainman says political gangbanging, blue versus red. Yeah. Yeah. Is it the Crips and the Bloods? Maybe. So there's also a well-studied construct called the authoritarian personality. Okay. This construct, again, not a DSM diagnosis. Okay. The authoritarian personality includes submission to perceived strong authority. Okay. Get that. Aggression towards any designated outgroups. We get that. Rigid thinking. That's very black and white. You're either with me or against me. High discomfort with ambiguity. Very clear orders. These personalities don't want anything that's complex. War against education and higher learning. They want certainty. They want hierarchy because they want to know who's given the orders and who has the power. They don't want to have to think for themselves. They want someone to tell them who is good and who is bad. And there's no in between. A malignant narcissistic leader offers exactly that, all of that. With, you get to sprinkle in a sense of moral superiority. But don't we see that? Don't we have that right now? Isn't that MAGA? Is it? Is it MAGA? Spain Man says, stop communism and Marxism. Yeah, they're so bad. They're so terrible. But capitalism has killed more people. Sigdigi says, ostracized, demonized, no pathways to redemption after owning up to their wrongdoings. The opposing sides may not have rationalized revenge and reprisals at the same time. Yeah, I get that. I get that. Yeah. So it's what I call this, they talk about trauma bonds. I talk about loyalty bonds. Okay. Humiliation is your loyalty bond. Look at the folks. So this is a darker part that people may not know about or they miss. When a leader humiliates others publicly and then their followers defend it, then a psychological bond is created. This loyalty bond. We are now in this together because we don't like them. Okay. The follower thinks if I defend this cruelty, this meanness, this bad behavior, and I am aligned with power, then I am not weak. Therefore, I'm not vulnerable. So over time, defending their cruelty becomes a loyalty ritual. So then the authoritarian, the malignant narcissist will put out tests, humiliation tests, to make sure that the follower then defends their behavior or eats the humiliation. Oh yeah, like you're right. We are kind of like that sometimes. It's not about right or wrong. It's never been about right or wrong. It's about proving which side you're on. Whose side are you on? Kind of like how, Marjorie Taylor Greene goes and supports the Epstein victims. And so Trump calls her a traitor for that. And then they got the whole back and forth going. She failed the loyalty test. So this is where perceived intelligence kind of gets misunderstood. Hey, Louis Conyers here. What's up? Thanks for being here. So someone can be highly educated, verbally skilled, cognitively sharp, and still be emotionally dependent on authority for their self-worth. It can happen. Intelligence helps them build much better arguments that are harder to fight. It does not necessarily help them question why they need to make those arguments in the first place. If you got to tell me what somebody meant when they said something heinous, maybe you ought to think about it. Or if you tell me you took it out of context, it's always out of context. Yeah, some things don't need a context. It's just crap. It's just bad. Right? Kayla says, y'all need to see Zeitgeist, the original first one. Interesting. So this is why throwing facts at sycophants will fail. And this is sycophants for whatever side, for whatever person, right? But that's why throwing facts at sycophants fails, because you're not arguing with like a simple belief that they have. You're arguing against their identity. Right? You know, like, well, you must not be this, you must not be that, is what they'll come back with. You know, because it is identity. Their comrades is who you're arguing when you deliver a fact. You are trying to take away their sense of belonging. This is their emotional attachment to power. So this is an existential threat. It actually feels like, and to them, it is an attack. So then they can say things like an attack on whiteness, an attack on Christmas, an attack on Christianity. Because if anybody has any pushback with facts, it is an attack of their identity. Kylie says, it changed my perspective on everything, and Spain Man has seen it several times over. So the core truth is, you know, when I ask myself, how do they not see this? How are they still supporting this? I have to remind myself that this relationship is not political for them. It is psychological. It is their identity. They are nothing without that identity. And humiliation has created a bond for them. So when you really like look under the hood of the attachment to power, you see something that is uncomfortable. Power isn't just like admired, okay? It's emotionally eroticized. Like I want it, I fantasize about it, I need it, right? I'm not like talking about sex. You can't have sex with power. But think about, I mean, it is a little bit sexual. That's why I say erotic, because think about when a man might say that an awesome car is a beautiful bitch, or that some huge amount of money makes him hard, right? That is non-sexual eroticizing. It's not a wrong thing or a bad thing, you know, to say that. It's just a thing. But sometimes it's a thing that can go very, very bad. Okay. And that's where wealth worship, dominance culture, and misogyny all intersect right there at that place. Okay. In this way, we're looking at your sense of belonging to a certain group as the only intimacy that you might get. Because remember, there's this sense of belonging, and we all have this bond now, this humiliation bond. And if my identity is MAGA, then I feel most myself, and I feel the best when I have, and when I say intimacy, that is not sex, that's closeness and connection. The only time I feel close and connected and like-minded is when I'm with these people. Okay. So what happens when power, dominance, and hierarchy become emotionally and symbolically charged in a way that resembles intimacy and attachment? Then you are the people that get accused of glazing the authority figure, or like bending over for a certain group. That's how you get those phrases, because it has become eroticized. Okay. Hopefully you're sticking with me here. I'm not talking about that everybody's having sex with somebody. Okay. In psychology, we understand that human beings eroticize a lot of things like power, control, status, submission, being chosen, being close to somebody who is perceived as dominant, big daddy, those kind of things. These dynamics show up in religion, military culture, corporate hierarchies, cults, and very clearly in political movements, especially those centered around dominant male leaders. We've seen it time and time and time and time again. Wealth is rarely just money in these systems. We have never had a poor leader. You can say Lincoln was, and I'll prove you wrong. Okay? Wealth becomes this symbol of potency. Like money becomes your big pickup truck. It's a phallic symbol. It's your dominance. It's your proof of worth. It's your proof of superiority. Makes sense? Extreme wealth gets treated like this visible marker of this masculine power. This person is powerful. They are untouchable, and therefore they are worthy of worship. That's why followers will excuse almost anything in the presence of wealth. The money itself becomes a stand-in for their moral authority. Somehow they have tons of money, which they had to do immoral things to get, but somehow that big, huge amount of money is a stand-in for their moral authority. Whatever they say is the right thing because they're rich. But that means you're submitting to the money, not to morality. So, submission to power is this displaced intimacy. In healthy development, intimacy involves mutuality, vulnerability, in a safe place, reciprocity. In power worship dynamics, intimacy gets displaced. Instead of closeness through equality, people seek closeness through proximity to dominance, what we might call proximity to whiteness. Because white wealth is seen as this dynamic power. Being near power becomes a substitute for feelings of connection. Being chosen by power, now that's a huge thing, okay? Being chosen by power becomes a substitute for being valued, right? You are now commodified by this power. You now have a value. So this creates emotional structures, okay? Devotion, idealizing them, being defensive on their behalf, jealousy, right? And then rage when somebody threatens that bond. Misogyny plays a very specific psychological role in this system. Okay. It's a defense against the things that women represent. And remember, right this moment, I'm talking about white male wealth. Okay. Women represent to these folks, okay, vulnerability, emotional needs or emotional neediness, being dependent, giving care to others. It's relational power rather than hierarchical power that you can buy. So for men who are terrified of vulnerability, because remember, they're the little squishy guy, right? They feel inferior. So they are terrified of vulnerability or being shamed. Then this contempt for women becomes a way to distance themselves from their own dependency needs. Adrian says, hence sellout culture. Hi, sweet Christmas. Thanks for being here. So you see this dynamic with YouTubers and streamers. You totally can. You totally can see sycophants there. Great example. So they have to distance themselves from their dependency needs, probably because they have mother issues and mother wounds. It's a way to control instead of compete for a woman, instead of competing for a woman, for the woman they want, they just demean and control them. That's the way to get what they want, is a sense of control. Okay. Many people in these systems carry deep, unacknowledged, because it's deep in there, it's deep in the squishy guy, right? But these are all the people in the party. They have this unacknowledged feeling of inferiority. They don't know it, they don't see it. It's not always conscious, it's not always articulated, but they do feel it because they bond out of humiliation. So it's there. They over identify with wealth and dominance, right? Because they can borrow that person's worth. They can live vicarious. This is the same as that saying, and I know one of you will put it in the chat, as a certain president was saying, if you convince the lowest white man that he is better than the best black man, he won't even notice when you're picking his pockets. In fact, he'll hand over his money to you. That is playing on that inferiority complex of not wanting to compete. Okay? So identifying and holding on to tooth and nail this dominant system is a way to borrow and exchange worth. If I align myself with power, then I am powerful by extension. If I defend wealth, then I am worthy by extension. If I submit to dominance, then I am protected from my own shame. I don't ever have to face it. So this is why attacks on these powerful figures is personal. If I attract your or attack your figurehead, you have to do whatever you can to make that not happen. And remember, you see everything as an attack. So you might break in to the Capitol and poop on somebody's desk. The power is not external. It's part of the followers' like psychological sense of self. LBJ, thank you. Adrian, thank you so much. So when you trace these attachment patterns back far enough, you will find something very early. Attachment difficulties with mom, most of the time with mom, with dad, right? It's in their early relationships with their caregivers. Because you know how when they said, you just got to wait for the racist to die off, nobody took into consideration that those old racists raised racists who have the next generation of racists in elementary school. You have to kill the racism. You don't just wait for it to die off. Okay. So when people like hear the term mommy issues, it usually gets turned into a joke, right? But in psychology, early relationships with primary caregivers, most often mothers, that's not a joke. It's very, very, very important. Okay. They are the blueprint for how we experience safety, worth, intimacy, and authority for the rest of our lives. These early attachment patterns don't disappear, they get reenacted, right? When we say daddy issues, that is not a joke. That is also part of early relationships because our relationship with our dads is how we experience resilience, our sense of self, and our own confidence in what we can do. Those early attachment patterns don't disappear either. They get reenacted. Adrian put the quote in the chat, the exact quote, and thank you so much because I was paraphrasing. Okay. Attachment theory tells us that infants and children develop internal working models of relationships based on how their caregivers respond to their needs. So if mom is not there, or mom is cold and distant, or psycho herself, or whatever, that becomes the baseline. That's the archetype for relationships with females. If dad is not there, or he's hitting everybody, or he has his own problems, or he's cold and distant, then that is how we look at the archetype of relationships with males in authority. So the child learns, am I safe? Am I worthy of being taken care of? Are my needs being met? Is being close to somebody like a reliable good thing, or is it dangerous? These become unconscious expectation templates about themselves, about others, about authority, power, protection, and care. That becomes the baseline model. Sigdigi says, in the case of Trump, his mother was away from him when he was little because his younger brother was hospitalized as a baby. So she was back and forth, which they tell you unreliable connection with mother in those early years does make someone susceptible to personality disorders. Neglect. So, does he have a personality disorder? I have no idea. I've never treated him. Does he have all these traits? Oh, hell yes. He said his father, Fred Sr., was known for being a cruel and callous man. Yes. Yes. These were not parents of the year. And all of that stuff is like out there. So, when early caregiving is inconsistent, rejecting, intrusive, emotionally unavailable, children develop insecure attachment. That shows up later. This insecure attachment shows up as a chronic fear of abandonment, shame-based self-worth, I've got to put myself down all the time, difficulty regulating their emotions. So we have, depression, anxiety disorders, things, a deep need for external validation. Am I doing this right? Am I saying this right? Am I okay? Am I good? In adulthood, authority figures become substitutes for mommy and daddy, for those early authority figures. Makes sense? Oh, and Trump's grandfather was a pimp. Lovely. So, a powerful leader can unconsciously represent, so this is unconscious for this person, but it represents the protective parent, the approving parent, the idealized parent. Loyalty becomes the attachment. If you give me the pat on the head, I will do whatever you want. So in an insecure attachment, people rely on something called splitting. Okay. Things are either all good or they're all bad. You are either all good or you are all bad. Things are either safe or they're dangerous. They either are a savior or they are an enemy. The leader becomes idealized almost like a messiah. Criticism of that leader doesn't feel like just a debate or a disagreement. It feels like a threat to safety. What'd you call my mom? Right? That's why emotional reactions are so intense. Everything is very black and white for people with insecure attachment. Many of these individuals carry deep, early shame, not always because something dramatic happened. Sometimes it's simply because emotional needs were not mirrored, validated, or met, right? So the child internalizes something's wrong with me. If mom or dad didn't take care of me or they left me, something's wrong with me, not they did something wrong. That sense of defectiveness gets played upon, especially in church. So we're going to talk about that for religion. It often follows people into adulthood. So aligning with powerful figures becomes a way to borrow worth. If they're great and I'm close to them, I'm great-ish. It's psychological outsourcing of their self-esteem. Sigdigi says IOBPD splitting is no fun. Absolutely, it is not. So here's the paradox. And thank you for being upfront and out with that. Appreciate that. Here's the paradox. Many people who present as fiercely independent or they're so anti-weak, right, are actually organized around their own dependency. Think about like, back in the day, the Goths, right? Like, I'm so nonconformist. We're all nonconformists together, right? This is a deep dependency need. It's experienced as shameful though, so it gets masked as being tough, being dominant, having contempt for the other because we're morally superior. This is where maternal relationships, so the mom, intersect with misogyny. Okay. If early experiences with caregivers involved rejection, engulfment, inconsistencies, or emotional unpredictability, unresolved anger and grief can get displaced. Okay. Because all of those things should make you angry and aggrieved. But as a child, you can't say or do anything about it. And you're taught, well, that's mom. We got to worship mom. We got to put mom on a pedestal, right? So it gets displaced. You got to put it somewhere. So instead of it being felt toward that original attachment figure, it gets generalized. So women become symbolic stand-ins for your terrible relationship with your mother when you don't have the emotional capacity and emotional intelligence to deal with it. So the feminine becomes associated with neediness and weakness and unreliability and emotional danger. So misogyny becomes a way to control and contain unresolved attachment pain. You are going to pay for what my mom did to me, which only builds upon itself over and over again if you continue to have more unresolved attachment pain. Because you're going to get into these relationships where you try to control and dominate and domineer, and they're going to leave you. So it's cyclical. Okay. Things happen with men too, but right now we're talking about white male wealth fitting this frame. Okay. Sweet Christmas is interesting. Kylie says, dang, my lady, you good. Thank you. Sigtiki says, or the emos. Emos. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. They were called goss, emos, those everybody who's nonconformist all together in a group. So most of this is not deliberate. Like I said, this is all unconscious things that people do. People are not sitting around thinking, I'm going to reenact my childhood through who my allegiances are, right? These are unconscious emotional logics. Like these are emotional gymnastics that are happening. They feel like truth, morality, and common sense. They feel that way. That's why they all think their opinions are fact, because it feels like truth, morality, and common sense. So, it gets more disturbing. The patterns, though, are not accidental. They are very well understood and they are exploited by the political system. They want people to raise more people that can be controlled. They understand psychology very well. Okay. So at this point, it's really important to understand something really clearly. These psychological dynamics are not just unfortunate side effects of modern politics, right? They are actively studied, they are strategically deployed, and they are systematically exploited. Think Lee Atwater. That's everything he did. What looks like chaos is often very precise emotional engineering. This is why Trump's responsible for J6. Okay. Trauma is not just a personal experience. Okay. In mass psychology, MASS, trauma becomes a political resource. It is something that can be used. Fear, humiliation, loss, and shame make people suggestible. It makes them more reactive. It makes them more likely to seek protection from authority. So when populations are stressed, overwhelmed, destabilized, they become easier to mobilize emotionally. And sometimes you just have to sell them on the idea that they're destabilized and being attacked. It's not about reason, right? It's through threat. So then you have J6. Makes sense. All right, so this is like the entire Democrat platforms. I'm not Trump, vote for me. So one of the most reliable tools is the fear-based messaging. Fear of being replaced. You know, we've all heard the replacement theory. Fear of losing your status, becoming irrelevant, being humiliated, right? These messages are not designed to be accurate, obviously. They are designed to be activating. And they most definitely come from all sides of the political theater. Once fear is activated, higher order reasoning goes offline because now you're in your lizard brain. The nervous system shifts into survival mode, and that's when people become easier to control. So, weaponized politics, which is exactly what we have in this country, it depends on rigid in-group and out-group structures, not just disagreement. It is structured. Who's in and who's out. So there has to be this moral division, right? We are good, they are evil. We are victims, they are the threat. This simplifies reality, but it intensifies their loyalty. Nuance is a betrayal. There is no gray, there is no nuance. Complexity means you're weak because you have no, courage in your convictions. Questioning is treasonous. Marjorie Trader Green, remember? Or get you labeled as a domestic terrorist. So leaders who understand attachment psychology know how to position themselves as an emotional anchor, right? This is like you playing hide and seek. They are home base, right? They want to be seen as this parental protective figure. This is where the patriarchy comes from, guys. They are very paternalistic. This is what white male wealth in authority creates the patriarchy because they want to be seen as this protective figure. They want to be the redeemer. They speak in language of rescue. I will protect you. I will fight for you. Only I understand your problems. This taps directly into our early attachment templates. Loyalty is the emotional safety. But public humiliation of the other is the cost. It's not random, right? These are dog whistles. These are signals. It tells followers, this is who has power. This is what happens to those who cross us, right? It also recruits followers into cruelty because you're saying the thing that I thought in my head that I can't say out loud. So when supporters laugh, mock, or defend the humiliation of others, they become psychologically invested. It is the bond. Participation in cruelty deepens the loyalty because to question it later would mean to question your own behavior, right? Spain Man says MAGA hates MTG. I went through a comment section and was like, OMG, this is a real hive. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you will respect my authority. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Another weapon is something called narrative saturation, and you see this again from both sides of the political aisle. The same story is told over and over and over and over. Repetition creates this emotional familiarity. Familiarity gets mistaken for truth. And over time, people just quit asking. So they do this narrative saturation of they keep saying the same things over and over again, and they will have all of their people say the same thing word for word, so that the more you hear it, the more you think it's reality. So then it's hard for somebody to tell you that it's not reality. Now, being a part of this in-group, you get this sort of outrage, this indignancy that can be addictive because outrage is neurologically reinforcing. It activates dopamine and adrenaline. It gives you this sense of purpose. It gives you a sense of urgency. And people can become addicted to that emotional hit of being angry on behalf of a leader or a cause. I'm angry on behalf of. This is who he protects me, I'm protecting him. Leaders who generate this constant outrage keep their base emotionally dependent on them. They make them addicted to the outrage. And calm would feel like you're not fighting. That's withdrawal. Why are you calm? We can't let up. We can never let up. The FBI is showing up and taking people who have been reporting on the ICE brutality. Damn, Kylie. Damn. How do we know? Because they lie so much. I haven't seen anything on it, but it doesn't sound like outside of the realm of possibility. But why does this work so well? This works because it doesn't require changing people's values at all. It just hijacks their nervous system. It bypasses reasoning and it goes straight to the fear, the shame, the attachment, the identity, the feelings of belonging. And once those systems are engaged, facts then become secondary to whatever else is going on. Okay? It's a dark feedback loop, right? So if you can't see it, Trump says, does everyone have either a torch or a pitchfork? And it's ICE, because who's an ICE. Anyway, the more emotionally dysregulated the base becomes, the more extreme the messaging has to get to maintain the engagement. You got to keep ramping it up. So that creates the escalation. Stronger enemies, bigger threats, more humiliation, more spectacle. The system becomes addicted to its own intensity. And it's all a war. And this is why people on the outside often say, I don't understand how anyone could fall for this. I don't get it. But from the inside, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like safety and belonging and survival. That's why it's so hard to break. Okay, one of the most common reactions from people watching this from the outside is genuine disbelief. I don't get it. How do they support this? Don't they see what's happening? And the answer is, from the outside, you're looking at behavior. From the inside, they're experiencing survival. Those are two very different psychological realities. So if somebody shows them a video and somebody that's in their group and tells them, look, see, she was trying to run him over, that's what they see. That's why it seems like we're all watching different videos, because everybody's telling us what we see. In this case, you're using different parts of the brain. So outsiders tend to analyze all of this behavior cognitively. Again, from both sides, they look at facts, they look at contradictions, evidence, outcomes, data, right? Insiders are operating emotionally and relationally. So what they're tracking is safety, belonging, loyalty, and threat. So when those two systems are engaged with each other, people literally can be standing in the same room and experiencing two completely different realities. Spainman says, and everything needs to be in a neat box. So if you challenge them, they assume you have to be a part of the other. Yeah, and that's my thing. Like when I say, if I tell you I love dogs, don't accuse me of hating cats. Because if you say something against Biden, they call you a Trumper. If you say something against Trump, they call you a libtard. Because they have to other people. Remember everything I've said, they have to put you somewhere. You're either with us or you're against us, okay? Sig Diggy says, it's similar to how extremists are able to recruit certain people with certain dispositions. Absolutely. They play into it for sure. So once someone has publicly committed, right, loyalty becomes self-protective. Backing out isn't just a political change, right? Changing your political party, like, oops, I was wrong, shucks, my bad. It threatens their social connections, their community standing, their family relationship. Think about when people want to leave a church. leaving a political party is almost as bad. You're talking about your personal identity, and walking away might mean that you are isolated for a period of time. And that feels way worse than being wrong. Oh, yeah. Sick Diggy says facts over feelings, feelings over facts. Yeah. So shame is one of the strongest forces keeping people locked on. Because remember, inferiority. The more extreme the behavior they've defended, the more cruel the statements they've excused, the louder that they've been, the harder it is to leave. Because leaving would require facing guilt, embarrassment, and responsibility for what you were doing and saying. So for most people, that's too much. That's a bridge too far, too psychologically heavy. Okay. This is why shaming actually never works. Like trying to shame people into seeing the facts of the situation, it really doesn't work. So when outsiders mock, insult, or demean the supporters, it confirms their internal narrative. They hate us. They look down on us. They want to humiliate us. All of that strengthens their in-group loyalty. The leader becomes the protector against the others humiliating them or attacking them or hurting them. The attack binds people closer to the very outsiders, to the very figure that the outsiders want them to question. So you see the vote blue no matter who. Outsiders often assume that if they just present better arguments, that people will change their minds. My gosh, you see this on social media. Facebook is terrible. But you can't argue someone out of the position they didn't reason themselves into. Let me say that again. You cannot argue someone out of a position that they didn't reason themselves into. They emotioned themselves into that position. This is not an intellectual position. It's an emotional one. Logic gets layered on top after. Okay? Outsiders often label this as stupidity. Unfortunately. Oh, you're so stupid. How are you so stupid? On both sides. That's inaccurate, and it's also counterproductive. What you're often seeing is not low intelligence. Often, not always, even though it feels like that other person's dumb as a doorknob, they're not. You're seeing high emotional dependency. You're seeing identity fusion. You're seeing an inferiority complex. You're seeing trauma-informed survival strategy. Okay? True deprogramming doesn't happen through humiliation. It doesn't happen through, I owned you, although it feels great sometimes. I say all this, and I will still argue with people on the Book of Faces because sometimes I just can't take the dumb stuff that is being said on both sides. Okay? That deprogramming happens when people feel safe enough to question it, when their nervous system is not under constant threat, when they're not constantly hypervigilant and paranoid, when they can imagine a life and an identity outside of their group. Without that, the facts just bounce off of them. Adrian says, don't argue with anyone that John Brown would have shot. Well, there is that as well. And John Brown is one of my heroes. So the real gap between insiders and outsiders is not political, it is psychological. Outsiders are watching a belief system. Insiders are protecting an attachment. This is what makes them sycophants. Okay, which brings us to the biggest picture, overarching, right? It isn't about one leader. It isn't about one person, okay? Or even one movement, one moment in history. These are unfortunately recurring human dynamics, especially where authoritarian figures are concerned. And unless we become psychologically literate about these things, we will keep mistaking that pathology for just the dance of politics. So, quick. I want to give you, just so that you can recognize it, some phrases that malignant narcissistic leaders use. Okay. So first, they have loyalty tests because they want submission. So they'll say, if you're not with me, you're against me. Only I can fix this. real whoever, patriots, true believers, whatever, stand with me. Like, you're not black if you don't vote for me. Remember when somebody said that? Anyone who criticizes me is helping the enemy. You either support this or you support chaos. It is a loyalty test. Okay. Your identity depends on your loyalty. Okay. Then they have victimhood inversion. We see this all the time, especially in white supremacy. This is reverse accountability, and they try to call it reverse racism. Okay. So they'll say things like, I'm being attacked. They're trying to silence me. I'm being treated so unfairly. Trump says that all the time. This is a witch hunt. They're persecuting us. So this means I hurt people, but I'm going to frame myself as the victim so you'll protect me, right? Then we have grandiosity and messiah type language. Nobody has ever done what I'm doing. They've never seen anything like this. History will remember me. I alone understand the problem. I was chosen for this moment. They are exceptional, right? Then we have dehumanizing. They're animals. They're vermin. They're illegals. They're poisoning the country. They're not real citizens, people, blah, 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 right? They deserve what's coming to them. Because if they're not human, I can hurt them without feeling guilty. That's all that is. Then we have reality control. This is gaslighting at scale. So they'll tell you what you've been told isn't real, or that never happened. You can't trust that video. The media is lying to you. Everyone is corrupt except us. Okay? I am your source of reality is what that says. Manufactured crisis. We see that all the time, right? Keep them in fear, keep them hypervigilant. The country is being destroyed. Democracy is on the chopping block. This is the end. We better act now. They're coming for you. Your way of life is under attack. This is our last chance. Fear-mongering. Because the fear-mongering makes you cling to the person. Then we have faux strength, which is real fragility, right? I never back down. I always win. I'm not afraid of anyone. They're weak. They're losers, right? That person is terrified of being seen as inadequate. We have loyalty through humiliation. We talked about that a lot. That is like a trauma bond, right? I tell it like it is. People are too sensitive. I'm just being honest. If you can't handle it, that's your problem. They deserved what was coming to them because they did XYZ wrong, right? All that says is I hurt people to prove that I'm in power, and you defend me so that you feel aligned with power. That's all that says. Then we have moral licensing, right? You have to be tough to win. This is war. The ends justify the means. We're not going to be nice anymore. They started this. They're just framing unethical behavior as a virtue. That's it. Then we have personalization of the state. Somatic narcissism. Wouldn't somatic narcissism have to do with the body, though? Tell me what you mean, Sick Diggy, so I know. So I don't say something totally off base. Okay, then we have personalization of the state. Okay, this is where we merge the self with the nation state. Nationalists, okay? They're attacking me because they hate you, right? An attack on me is an attack on the country because we're one and the same. If I go down, you go down. I am your voice. I am the voice of the nation. I am the voice of the people. Without me, you have nothing, right? So if I'm the country, if I'm the nation, then questioning me is what? Treason. And then I'm going to post things up that the punishment for treason is being hung. Now, I have used Trump as an example several times, not the only examples by any means, but I believe what I believe. So I have used Trump as an example. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to tell you some things about Trump. Okay, let me get this piece of paper. I wrote down these notes this morning, so they are just all cattywampus everywhere. Okay. Oh, faux strength. Yeah. Yeah, projecting strength. Yeah. So these are some things about Trump. And based on everything we've just talked about, you tell me what you think. Okay. So let's talk about just general crime. Okay. We have Russiagate, which was proven that Russia interfered. They made Trump win, but his people were convicted and Trump got off scot-free, even though he was the one that got convicted. Trump University was found to be a grift and a sham. In 2019, Trump was impeached. The J6 insurrection, and 2021 to 22, missing documents from the White House were found at Trump's place. 2023, the Trump organization was convicted of tax fraud. He himself has been charged with over 90 felonies, most of which were dropped when he was elected again, but he was found guilty of 34 counts of fraud. In 2025 to 26, there are multiple court cases still ongoing of Trump doing illegal things and disregarding the Constitution. The judges will say it's illegal and he has to follow the law, he has to do this, he has to do that, and he does not care. And his people will say, I do not care. We are doing XYZ. And they were told to turn the plane around. They did not. There are tons of court cases right now. Okay. So we have that. Let's talk about ableism. Okay. He mocked a disabled reporter. He calls people, this is a quote, retarded, including calling a deaf actress a retard. He has been removing disability rights. He told his nephew with a disabled son that all disabled people should just die. Okay. Racism. In 1973, he was sued by the Department of Justice for discriminating against Black renters. The whole birther thing that we know about. Central Park 5. Hopefully you guys know about that. If you don't, I will explain it. Right? At the riots, he said there's good people on both sides, very fine people talking about racists. He said, yes, we have to condemn the KKK and some other group. Can't remember which one he said, Proud Boys, whatever. But there's very fine people on both sides. Well, they're racists, even if they don't pledge allegiance to a group, right? The whole shithole countries thing. He said that American-born Black and brown congresswomen should go back to their countries. They are citizens. What else? He accepts all white South African immigrants, and they were all given land. He said he wanted good immigrants from Denmark, Sweden, and the Netherlands. Those are the good ones. And we have the whole ICE, National Guard, all the stuff that's happening in Chicago and DC against Black people. It's not about immigration. Obama deported way more people than Trump ever has, especially at this point in the presidency. It's not about that. Sex abuse. Okay. He was found liable and admitted in a deposition of the rape of E. Jean Carroll. More than 24 allegations of sex abuse, including Ivana accusing him of rape. She later took it back and said, well, we were married. I don't want anybody to think that he's a rapist. In 2005, you had him the whole grab him by the and kissing people without permission. In 2016, all the Stormy Daniels things came out. And that's just with the adults. Leon says, Maggie, I'm 20 minutes behind and I want to email you on a simple topic of replacement theory. Just in general, if white and blacks remain in America, won't we eventually look different than Euro and Africa? I'm sure. Okay, that was just the adults in sex abuse. He was for 10 years, he was best friends with a notorious child sex trafficker. He was never an FBI informant. There's no proof of that whatsoever. He didn't even say that. He was never an FBI informant. They were best friends. Think about your best friend. Your best friend doesn't do nothing that you don't know about. He bragged about looking at naked teens in dressing rooms at the Miss Teen USA. He told Howard Stern that the youngest he would date is 12. He joked that if she wasn't his daughter, he'd date Ivanka. Multiple multiple Epstein Maxwell victims name Donald Trump. Okay, those are allegations. I'm not saying he's guilty of any of that. There's an allegation that he had calendar girl parties at Mar-a-Lago. This is in the Epstein files, and he would insert his finger in these young girls for tightness tests. He is alleged to have a sex trafficking ring through the Trump golf course, and accused of having child sex orgies at the Trump golf course. Okay. Then we have all the allegations of murder. There was a person drugged and raped who alleged that Trump was the one who did it. She woke up, she called a friend for help, she disappeared and has never been seen from again. That is in the Epstein files. Another person was told if she talked, she'd be buried with the other cunts at the Trump golf course. And then another allegation is that he got a teen pregnant and was present when the girl's uncle tossed the newborn overboard on a yacht. So here's the thing. And again, a lot of that is allegations. There's a lot that's very true that's been proven. There's a lot that's allegation. But you all believe it when the files name Clinton and Obama. You'll even believe Clarence Thomas and Jay-Z were involved when they're mentioned, right? Solely what's in the files, you believe that. But Trump, nah, it's a Democrat hoax. Come on. You have believed much more with much less. But nobody wants to believe this about Trump. You know. And let me get these papers back. That's just my Trump list. Believe what you want to. But, y'all will believe much more with much less. And you have. People, somebody comes 14, says a girl, when I was 14, R. Kelly did this, that, and the third. And it was proven in court that he did. Fine. Put him in jail. Throw away the key. He did this to, peri-adolescent girls. Exactly. That's exactly what should happen. And tons of people believed it off of one allegation, let alone when more stuff came out. Everybody believed that. There's still debates about Michael Jackson, and he's dead. But Trump, that was a long-ass list, and it was not all-encompassing. That is the highlight reel. I'm just saying. Okay. All right, at this point, it should be clear that trauma, shame, identity, and power can be braided together into something that looks political. Yes, the Afrikaners, Sick Diggy, that's who I was talking about. This functions psychologically, these sycophantic behaviors, right? When malignant narcissistic personalities rise, they don't rise alone. They rise inside of systems that reward the spectacle. It rewards the cruelty, the emotional capture, and they rise among populations that are already carrying unresolved fear, loss, humiliation, the need to not want to compete. They feel inferior. They have unmet attachment needs. That's where we get it. What gets labeled as strong leadership is often untreated pathology. Okay. What gets praised as telling it like it is sadism. What gets admired as being fearless is a lack of empathy. Without psychological literacy, this emotional intelligence, we confuse dominance with strength. And then we pay for it in the end. We always pay for it because it keeps repeating in history. The pattern is not new. History is full of charismatic, cruel, paranoid, grandiose leaders. The only thing that really changes is the technology. The nervous system vulnerabilities are the same. It stays the same, and that's what they're tapping into. And until we understand those vulnerabilities, we keep reenacting the same story with different costumes. Psychological literacy is not soft. It is a defense against all this mess. Okay. Understanding these dynamics is not about just being nice and having empathy because all these people have trauma and inferiority, blah, blah, blah. No, that they are adults. That is on them. Psychological literacy is how you recognize when you're being emotionally manipulated. It's how you notice when fear is being used instead of facts. And it's how you tell the difference between leadership and domination. Okay? There's an uncomfortable part. The vulnerabilities are not unique to one political group. They are human. These vulnerabilities can exist in everyone. Any population under enough stress, fear, and humiliation can be captured in this way. So you can keep asking, how could they? How could they follow this person? How can they, not see this? How can they support this? You can keep asking, or you can ask, what conditions made this possible? And how do I change it? All right. Thanks, everybody, for sticking with me. This is almost a 2-hour show, which for me is odd. You guys know that. But I wanted to get through it because this is part 1 of 3. Malignant narcissism of control. We did politics. The other 2 episodes are going to be on religion and on money. So we're going to have those. We'll also have a show after that. It's in the works on how seasoning plays into elitism. And sometimes white supremacy. So that'll be an interesting show. Coming up this Wednesday, we're going to continue with the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. And like I said, we'll have part 2 of Malignant Narcissism next weekend. So if I don't see you Wednesday, I hope to see you Sunday. And now I'm going to show you a picture of my dog.
Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not soteric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. Let's uncover the universe together.